like a fairly insignificant amount of time to you, but that is how long I spent living analog. I designed a sort of social experiment to test my hypothesis that living without the distraction of digital communication could be a catalyst for achieving your own aesthetic moment. I'll begin with my aesthetic moment, or when I discovered something I truly and wholeheartedly loved and from which a lifelong pursuit was born. When I was in the 8th grade, my interest in music became a passion. I started to discover artists that were new to me and rediscover the old. Thus, I announced to my family that I was going to refurbish an old turntable I found in my basement, but my dad wasn't so keen on the idea. So instead, I decided to do my culminating 8th grade research paper on the merits of digital versus vinyl music. And for my birthday that year, I was pleasantly surprised with a brand new Sony turntable and my very first album, a previously owned copy of the Beatles' Let It Be. When I tore the wrapping paper from Let It Be and let those confetti scraps fall to the floor, I gained a new understanding of what music really was. The sudden romanticism of music hit me. The fact that I was holding someone's previously owned copy of an album that had been released 50 years prior. In that moment, looking at the cover art and the liner notes, I was able to attach something tangible to music, something I hadn't been able to do on my iPod, when I could not physically touch what was being played. All this, and I hadn't even put the record on yet. The magic began when I let the needle drop on the first song of the record, Two of Us. I was wholly enveloped in staticky silence for about 15 seconds. However, that protracted silence held something magnificent in itself, because the silence was not in fact silent. I listened closely as the needle picked up on tiny dust motes that had attached themselves to the grooves in the record, and my anticipation was heightened. A sort of white noise was created that made me feel nostalgic for something unknown to me. And then the music began. Now, I had heard the Beatles before, singing along to a car stereo, and they're even in my iTunes library. But as soon as those first notes greeted me, I knew I had never really listened. A smile spread slowly across my face as John Lennon's voice washed over me, because the experts I had referenced in my capstone paper were all correct. The sound quality was indubitably superior. From that moment on, listening to music became an event that required all 5 senses, watching the table revolve and feeling the record in my hand, even smelling that peculiar smell that vinyl gives off after it's been played for a while. Maybe not tasting, but above all, listening. With every fiber of my being, I was drawn to that stereo, listening to John's crooning and shushing anyone that interrupted me. It's safe to say that today, Two of Us is my all-time favorite song and most worn track on any album that I own. So as I began to adapt to this new style of listening, a thought began to puzzle me. I thought to myself, shouldn't the sound quality on my iPod, a technological innovation of this century, sound better than the seemingly antiquated and primitive stereo? Shouldn't we, as innovators, have progressed? The answer is no. We have in fact regressed. When a musical track is converted to its MP3 form, all the essential background noise that creates an audibly better sounding product is cut out, leaving a canned and sterile end product. The more I pondered at the mystery of vinyl, the more the thought transcended into my everyday life. As I grew older, I noticed a preponderance of technology that has made communicating easier, but people have stopped listening. Communicating digitally is similar to listening to music on your iPod. It's easy and accessible, but all of that essential background noise that exists on the vinyl music is cut out, just like on an MP3 track. Today, we seem to have traded in the quality of our discourse for portability and ease when it comes to the craft of conversing. I say we because I am readily admitted a culprit of this abuse of digital technology. I have on numerous occasions found myself cutting corners conversationally. So my experiment explored just this. I thought, why not spend a week without digital communication to see if my theories actually have some merit? Shouldn't be that hard, I thought to myself. Just shut off my phone and live as close to off the grid as possible. Now, I'm not going to pretend that it wasn't difficult or that it was particularly fun. In fact, I invite you to read my journal entries from this time. They're a thoroughly teenage affair, riddled with lamentations and even a countdown. However, I did make some eye-opening observations during that week. While I couldn't reach out to my friends and ask what the homework was for that night, and the Yankees scores weren't mobily accessible, I came to some interesting conclusions. For example, I had to wait for some of my closest friends to finish writing a text before I could continue my conversation with them. Few people, excepting the extremely diligent, would ignore a message or a call when speaking with me. Maybe I had never noticed it before because I was always on the opposite end of that treatment, but it eventually began to bother me. It was almost as if I was conversing with half of someone, because half of their attention was devoted to their digital conversation. While there are certainly countless merits attributed to digital communication, the analog conversations I had during that week were remarkably different. My attention span was longer, and I was less distracted by what was going on around me. When I sat down to talk to someone, it became an event in which I was able to make eye contact and hear the inflections in their voice to interpret more of their story, not just their words. I was using all 5 senses, similar to my first experiences with vinyl music. So I'm not proposing a total elimination of all digital devices because I think innovation today is extremely commendable, aside from that digital music conundrum. However, I do seek to raise awareness. Please, always remain cognizant of conversational etiquette. And when we listen, we should listen and absorb, reflect on the things that make face-to-face communication unique. Because today, 3 letters, LOL, are just not enough to replace genuine laughter in our everyday lives. Thank you.